A lonely widow adopted a stray dog, never knowing it was the Tsar's beloved lost pet. Elena Petrov had no way of recognizing the significance of the matted, trembling creature huddled beneath her garden gate that rain-soaked autumn evening. She only saw another soul as broken as her own. The rain drummed relentlessly against the windows of Elena's cottage, a small stone dwelling on the outskirts of St. Petersburg. Inside, the silence was even louder. 3 years had passed since Ivan's death, yet the emptiness had only expanded, filling every corner of their once warm home with a chill no fire could chase away. Elena moved through her evening routine like a ghost. 62 years of life etched in the lines around her eyes, in the silver threading through her once raven hair. Her hands, still strong from decades of garden work, trembled slightly as she prepared her solitary tea. Outside, the November wind howled, rattling the shutters like unwelcome visitors. She hadn't always been alone. Once, laughter had filled these rooms. Ivan's deep chuckle, their son Mikhail's boyish giggles, even her own voice, lighter then, before Mikhail moved to America. Before Ivan's heart gave out one quiet Tuesday morning. Before silence became her most faithful companion. The knock was so faint she almost missed it beneath the storm's tantrum. Not a knock, a scratch. Hesitant, barely there. Elena paused, her teacup halfway to her lips. There it was again, a desperate little scrape against her back door. "Who could be?" she murmured, setting down her cup. Suspicious visitors didn't come to widows' doors with gentle scratches. When she opened the door, the wind nearly yanked it from her grasp. Rain lashed her face as she peered into the darkness. Nothing. Then, a movement at her feet. A sodden bundle of dirty fur shivering violently, 2 amber eyes staring up with an exhaustion Elena recognized all too well. "Oh, you poor creature," she whispered. The dog, for that's what it was beneath the mud and tangles, cowered when she reached down. It was thin, ribs visible beneath its matted golden coat. One paw was held awkwardly, clearly injured, but it was the eyes that caught Elena, intelligent, weary, and carrying something she couldn't quite name, something almost human. "Come inside, little one. The night is no place for either of us." Elena hadn't touched another living being in months. Her neighbors kept their distance, unsure how to approach a grief they feared contagious. When she lifted the trembling animal, its weight was shocking, both heavier and lighter than expected. The dog didn't resist, instead seeming to collapse against her as if relinquishing a long-carried burden. "You're safe now," she murmured, surprised to find she meant it. Her bathroom became a makeshift veterinary clinic. The dog watched her warily as she filled the tub with warm water, but didn't struggle when she gently lowered it in. As the water turned gray, then black with dirt, Elena's methodical hands revealed a coat of stunning golden fur, elegant and fine despite its current condition. "You're quite beautiful under all this, aren't you?" she said softly. "Where did you come from, I wonder?" The dog had no collar, no tags. Its injured paw wasn't broken, just badly cut. Elena cleaned the wound carefully, wrapped it in a strip of clean cloth. Throughout her ministrations, the dog remained unnaturally still, those amber eyes never leaving her face. "You must be hungry," Elena said, patting the dog dry with her second-best towel. In the kitchen, she warmed some soup left over from her lonely dinner and placed it in a shallow bowl. The dog approached cautiously, sniffed once, then looked up at Elena as if seeking permission. "Go ahead," she urged. "It's for you." The animal ate with surprising delicacy, nothing like the desperate gulping she'd expected from a stray. When finished, it sat back on its haunches and regarded her with that same peculiar intensity. "Well," Elena said, suddenly self-conscious, "I suppose you'll need somewhere to sleep tonight." She arranged a makeshift bed from an old blanket near the kitchen stove. The dog circled 3 times before settling, eyes still trained on Elena until they finally drifted closed. Elena watched the steady rise and fall of the animal's side for several minutes. Something long dormant shifted inside her chest, a warmth she'd nearly forgotten, expanding tentatively like the first green shoot after winter's longest night. "Just for tonight," she told herself. But even as she whispered these words into the quiet kitchen, she recognized the lie. Dawn arrived with surprising clarity after the previous night's tempest. Elena woke with a start, momentarily confused by the weight against her legs. The dog had somehow migrated from the kitchen to her bed during the night, curled in a golden crescent at her feet. "Well, you've made yourself at home, haven't you?" she said. The dog's tail thumped twice against the quilt, eyes still closed in feigned sleep. For the first time in years, Elena found herself smiling before her first cup of tea. She hadn't planned to keep him. That's what she told herself as days stretched into a week, then 2. She placed notices in the village square. Found dog. Golden male. Gentle disposition. No one came forward. She wasn't disappointed, not exactly, but the relief she felt was impossible to deny. She began calling him Zoloto, Gold, in Russian, for his gleaming coat that grew more lustrous each day under her care. The limp from his injured paw faded, his ribs disappeared beneath healthy flesh. But it was his eyes that changed most dramatically, the wariness replaced by a bright attentiveness that followed Elena through her days. "You're no ordinary stray, are you?" Elena asked one crisp December morning as they walked the snowy path to the village. Zoloto trotted beside her with uncommon discipline, never pulling at the makeshift leash she'd fashioned from old rope. "Someone trained you very well." In the village, Elena noticed the whispers, the sideways glances. Not unkind, but curious. The widow Petrov with a dog. The widow Petrov smiling. The transformation wasn't lost on her either. How her steps had lightened, how the silence in her cottage had softened from oppressive to companionable. "Mrs. Petrov! What a magnificent animal!" called Irina Volkova, the baker's wife, as Elena selected her weekly loaf. "Thank you," Elena replied, surprised by the pride warming her voice. "He found me, actually. Such unusual breeding." Irina continued, leaning over the counter to better study Zoloto, who sat perfectly poised at Elena's side. "Those markings around his eyes, almost like he's wearing a mask, isn't it? And such perfect posture." Elena hadn't noticed the distinctive brown patches surrounding Zoloto's eyes, giving him an almost regal appearance. Yes, he is rather special. That evening, as snow gathered on the windowsills, Elena sat by the fire darning socks. Zoloto lay stretched before the hearth, his golden coat gleaming like treasure in the firelight. Occasionally he would lift his head, seeking her eyes, as if checking that she remained. Each time, Elena found herself smiling reassurance. "We're quite the pair, aren't we?" she said softly. Two strays who found each other. She wasn't sure when she began speaking aloud to him, perhaps the second day or the third. By the second week, one-sided conversations filled her formerly silent home. She told Zoloto about Ivan, about their 50 years together, about Mikhail in America, too busy with his new family to visit, about her garden plans for spring, about the emptiness that had defined her days before a rain-soaked bundle of fur arrived at her door. Zoloto listened with a focused attention that sometimes startled her. His head would tilt at certain words. His eyes would soften when her voice cracked with emotion. Sometimes, in unguarded moments, Elena could almost believe he understood. Winter deepened. Christmas approached. For the first time since Ivan's death, Elena found herself wanting to celebrate. She hung a small wreath on the door. Baked gingerbread, Ivan's favorite. Even dragged a small pine branch into the house, decorating it with the paper stars she and Mikhail had made decades ago. "It's silly," she told Zoloto as she hung the faded decorations, "but it feels right somehow." On Christmas Eve, snow fell in fat, lazy flakes that transformed the world into a fairy tale. Elena and Zoloto walked to evening service, the dog leaving perfect paw prints alongside her footsteps. The church glowed with candlelight, voices raised in ancient carols that Elena had once loved. She hesitated at the entrance, suddenly uncertain. It had been years since she'd attended. She didn't belong anymore, this half-person she'd become. A warm pressure against her leg. Zoloto leaning his substantial weight against her, amber eyes lifted to her face. Encouraging. Steady. Elena took a deep breath and stepped inside. After service, neighbors who had kept their distance for years approached with cautious smiles, admiring Zoloto, including Elena in their greetings. Mrs. Sokolov even invited her for New Year's dinner. Elena found herself accepting before she could consider reasons to refuse. That night, as moonlight painted silver paths across her bedroom floor, Elena realized something had changed. The ache of loneliness that had defined her existence since Ivan's death had shifted, not disappeared. Grief never truly vanishes, but transformed into something bearable, something that shared space with newer, gentler emotions. "You did this," she whispered to Zoloto, who lay curled beside her bed. "You brought me back to life?" The dog raised his head, regarded her solemnly, then rested his muzzle on her outstretched hand. His breath warm against her skin, rhythmic and comforting. Elena drifted to sleep with her fingers buried in golden fur. Spring arrived with astonishing speed. Or perhaps, Elena reflected as she turned soil in her garden, it was simply that time moved differently now. Days had purpose beyond mere survival. Her garden expanded. She joined the church choir. She walked to the village daily with Zoloto prancing proudly beside her, no longer needing even the pretense of a leash. "He follows you like a shadow," observed Mr. Kuznetsov, the elderly postmaster. "Most loyal creature I've ever seen. We understand each other," Elena replied simply. And they did. Somewhere in those winter months, communication had evolved between them, wordless but profound. Zoloto seemed to anticipate her moods, pressing close on difficult days when memories of Ivan surged, gambling playfully when her spirits lifted. Elena, in turn, learned to read the subtle shifts in his posture, the different meanings in his various yips and sighs. In late April, Elena received a letter from Mikhail. He was coming to visit in June, bringing his American wife and their 7-year-old twins, Elena's first grandchildren whom she'd never met. Her hands trembled as she read his words. "We miss you, Mama. It's time to be a family again. Did you hear that, Zoloto?" she cried, tears and laughter mingling. "They're coming home!" The dog danced around her, sharing her joy without understanding its source, his tail sweeping ornaments from the low table. That evening, as golden sunset bathed her garden in honeyed light, Elena sat on the worn bench Ivan had built decades ago. Zoloto lay at her feet, occasionally lifting his head to track the movements of birds among the new blossoms. "I wish Ivan could have met you," she said softly, scratching behind Zoloto's ears. "He always wanted a dog, you know. I was the one who resisted." "Too much mess," I said. "Too much trouble." She laughed softly. How foolish I was. Zoloto pressed his head against her knee, eyes closing in contentment. "I've been thinking," she continued, "the children will need space to play. Perhaps we should build onto the back of the cottage. Nothing elaborate, just a room or two." She glanced down, smiling. "What do you think? Can we make a proper family home again?" The word family settled in the evening air, unexpected but right. She, Zoloto, Mikhail, his wife, the children, connected threads weaving a new tapestry from fragments of the old. Elena didn't hear the approaching carriage until it was nearly at her gate. Zoloto's ears pricked forward, his body suddenly alert. An elegant black coach with polished brass fittings stopped before her modest home, the driver in a uniform she didn't recognize. A tall man in an impeccable suit emerged, his bearing so formal it seemed almost military. Elena rose slowly, one hand falling protectively to Zoloto's head. "Mrs. Elena Petrov?" the man inquired, his Russian perfect but carrying the faint accent of the royal court. "Yes," she answered cautiously. "I am Dmitry Volkov, special envoy to the royal house." He bowed slightly. "I apologize for this intrusion, but we have been searching for—" He stopped abruptly. Zoloto had risen, his posture changing dramatically, head high, tail straight, something almost regal in his bearing. The man's face drained of color. "Impossible," he whispered. "Sasha?" Zoloto's tail gave a single hesitant wag. "You know my dog?" Elena asked, confusion clouding her voice. "Madam," Volkov said, regaining his composure with visible effort, "I believe you have been caring for Sasha, the personal companion of His Imperial Majesty, Tsar Nicholas II." The world seemed to tilt beneath Elena's feet. "The Tsar's dog? That's impossible. With respect, Mrs. Petrov, there is no mistake. Those distinctive markings, the mask-like coloration around the eyes, are unique to this bloodline. Sasha disappeared during an imperial hunt 6 months ago. We searched extensively but found no trace. His Majesty has been most affected by the loss." Elena's hand tightened in Zoloto's, no, Sasha's fur. The dog pressed closer to her side, his loyalty unmistakable. "The Tsar would be most grateful for his pet's return," Volkov continued, his eyes evaluating the humble cottage, Elena's worn gardening clothes. "There would, of course, be a substantial reward. A reward, as if any amount of money could compensate for what Zoloto had given her." Elena felt something cold unfurl in her stomach. "May I have some time to consider this?" she asked, working to keep her voice steady. Volkov frowned slightly but nodded. "I shall return tomorrow afternoon. His Majesty is most eager to be reunited with his companion." After the carriage departed, Elena sank back onto the bench, her legs suddenly unable to support her. Zoloto, she couldn't think of him as Sasha, rested his head in her lap, his amber eyes filled with a concern that seemed almost human. "The Tsar's dog," she whispered. "No wonder you have such fine manners." The truth settled between them, heavy with implication. This animal who had saved her from the abyss of grief, who had restored her to life, he had another home. A palace, not a cottage. A royal master, not a widow. That night, Elena barely slept. Zoloto remained unusually alert as well, abandoning his usual place on the rug to lie pressed against her side, his warmth a comfort against the chill certainty of morning. "What am I to do?" she whispered into his fur. "How can I give you up? But how can I keep what isn't mine?" Zoloto offered no answers, only the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her palm. Dawn arrived with merciless clarity. Elena moved through her morning routine mechanically, stoking the fire, brewing tea, cutting bread. Zoloto followed her movements with watchful eyes, sensing her distress. "We'll walk to the village," she decided suddenly. "One last time together." The day was perfection. Late spring sunshine warming the earth, wildflowers dotting the meadows like scattered gems. Elena walked slowly, memorizing everything. How Zoloto pranced ahead, then circled back to check on her. How his coat gleamed copper gold in the sunlight. How he seemed to smile up at her with each panting breath. In the village, news had somehow already spread. Neighbors regarded her with a mixture of awe and pity. "Is it true, then?" asked Mrs. Sokolov as Elena selected vegetables in the small market. "Your dog belongs to the Czar himself. He was never mine to begin with," Elena replied, the words like stones in her mouth. Other villagers gathered, exclaiming over Zoloto's suddenly apparent noble lineage. The dog endured their attention with the patience Elena had come to expect, but stayed pressed against her legs, his loyalty unmistakable. "What will you do?" someone asked. Elena looked down at the animal who had become her salvation. "What can I do? He doesn't belong to me." They returned home as the afternoon lengthened into golden shadows. Elena sat at her kitchen table, Zoloto's head heavy in her lap, and allowed herself to weep for the first time, quiet tears that dampened his fur. "You saved me," she whispered. "You brought me back to life when I thought life was finished with me. How do I say goodbye to that?" The sound of approaching hooves came too soon. Volkov had returned, this time with a smaller, more ornate carriage. When Elena opened her door, he stood waiting, a leather leash in his gloved hands. "Mrs. Petrov," he greeted her formally. "I trust you have had sufficient time to prepare for His Majesty's property to be returned." Property, the word stung. Zoloto was so much more than that. "May I have a moment?" she asked. Volkov inclined his head slightly. Elena knelt before Zoloto, taking his face between her weathered hands. "You must go home now," she said softly. "Back to where you belong, to your real master." The dog's eyes never left hers, that same intelligence and warmth that had first captured her heart shining steadily back at her. "I will never forget you," she whispered, pressing her forehead to his. "Thank you for bringing me back to life." Then, straightening with a dignity that surprised even her, Elena turned to Volkov. "He's ready now." The imperial envoy stepped forward with the leash, but as he reached for Zoloto's collar, the dog shifted away, pressing closer to Elena's side. Volkov frowned. "Sasha," he commanded sharply. "Come." The dog didn't move. Volkov tried again, his tone more authoritative. "Sasha, your master awaits." Zoloto looked at the man, then back to Elena, then deliberately sat down, leaning heavily against her legs. "It seems," said a new voice, rich with authority, "that Sasha has found another master." Elena turned in surprise. A third carriage had arrived unnoticed, this one even more elaborate than the others. From it descended a man Elena recognized instantly from coins and portraits, Tsar Nicholas II himself, dressed not in full regalia, but in a simple hunting outfit. Elena dropped immediately into a deep curtsy, her heart hammering. "Your Imperial Majesty?" she stammered. "I had no idea." "Please rise," the Tsar said, his voice gentler than she'd expected. "I wish to see for myself the woman who rescued my beloved companion." Zoloto, Sasha, had gone very still at the sound of the Tsar's voice, his ears pricked forward, tail giving a single uncertain wag. But he didn't move from Elena's side. The Tsar approached slowly, studying the tableau before him, the humble widow, the loyal dog. When he knelt to Zoloto's level, Elena was struck by how human the gesture seemed, how unlike her imaginings of imperial behavior. "Hello, old friend," Nicholas said softly. "We've missed you terribly." Zoloto took one hesitant step forward, then another. His tail began to wag more confidently as he sniffed the Tsar's extended hand. Then, with a small whine, he licked Nicholas's fingers before immediately returning to press against Elena's legs. The Tsar rose, an expression of thoughtful surprise on his face. "Volkov has told me how you found him," he said to Elena. "Half-starved, injured in the middle of a storm. You took him in without knowing who he was." "Anyone would have done the same, Your Majesty," Elena replied. "No," Nicholas said simply. "They would not." He glanced around at Elena's small garden, the stone cottage beyond. "Volkov also tells me you live alone." "My husband passed 3 years ago, Your Majesty. My son lives in America." The Tsar nodded slowly, his eyes returning to Zoloto, who remained pressed firmly against Elena's side, his loyalty unmistakable. For a long moment, Nicholas was silent, seeming to weigh something in his mind. "Mrs. Petrov," he finally said, "I believe we face an unusual situation. It appears Sasha has formed a bond with you that rivals his attachment to the royal household." Elena's heart leapt, then immediately constricted with guilt. "Your Majesty, I would never presume to keep what belongs to the crown." "And yet," Nicholas replied with a small, sad smile, "sometimes what belongs to us chooses differently." He knelt again, running a hand along Zoloto's back. "He was a gift from my late father. The finest hunting dog from the imperial kennels, but more than that, a companion during difficult times." Elena remained silent, hardly daring to breathe. "The children miss him terribly," Nicholas continued. "My youngest daughter asks for him every night." The words were like physical blows. Of course, she thought, how could she compare her simple need to the love of imperial children? "I understand, Your Majesty," she said, forcing steadiness into her voice. "I'll fetch his blanket." But as she turned toward the house, Nicholas stopped her with a gentle word. "Wait." Elena turned back, confused. "I have a proposal," the Tsar said, straightening to his full height, "one that might satisfy all concerned." 3 weeks later, Elena stood in the grand entrance hall of the Winter Palace, trying not to gape at the opulence surrounding her. Zoloto sat perfectly poised at her side, seemingly at ease in these familiar surroundings. The Tsar's proposal had been unexpected. Elena would become the official royal dog keeper, responsible for Sasha and several other imperial canines. She would have quarters on the palace grounds, but would also maintain her cottage, traveling between the two homes with Sasha as her companion. The royal children could visit their beloved pet, and Elena would not lose the creature who had returned her to life. "Mrs. Petrov," a child's voice echoed through the marble hall. The youngest Grand Duchess, Anastasia, came running toward them, her governesses hurrying behind. "Is it really Sasha? Has he really come home?" Elena curtsied as she'd been instructed. "Yes, Your Highness. He's very happy to see you." Zoloto's tail wagged furiously as the little girl threw her arms around his neck. "I missed you so much," Anastasia whispered into his fur. Then, remembering her manners, she straightened and offered Elena a perfect little curtsy. "Thank you for taking care of him when he was lost, Mrs. Petrov." "It was my honor, Your Highness. He took care of me, too." A strange sort of symmetry, Elena thought as she watched Zoloto being joyfully greeted by each member of the royal family in turn. This dog had saved her from crippling loneliness, brought her back to life, and now he had given her a new purpose, a bridge between her simple world and this extraordinary one. "He'll be happy here," came a quiet voice beside her. The Tsarina Alexandra had approached without Elena noticing, her gentle face kind despite its regal bearing. "But I believe he would not be truly content without you nearby. Animals have a wisdom we sometimes lack. They recognize true kindness when they find it." "Thank you, Your Majesty," Elena replied, deeply moved by the Tsarina's words. Later that evening, as Elena settled into her new quarters, a small but elegant apartment in the servants' wing of the palace, she marveled at the strange turns life could take. 6 months ago, she had been a widow fading quietly into grief. Now she was part of the imperial household, with Zoloto as the bridge between her past life and this unexpected future. For tonight, though, the dog chose to stay with her rather than in the royal apartments. He curled on the new bed, grander than any Elena had ever slept in, watching her with those same intelligent amber eyes that had first connected with her soul on a rain-soaked night. "Well?" she said, smiling as she stroked his golden head. "It seems we've both been given a second chance." The summer unfolded with a gentle rhythm Elena could never have imagined. Weekdays at the palace, where she cared for the imperial dogs and watched Zoloto bask in the adoration of the royal children. weekends at her cottage, where Mikhail and his family visited from America, filling the once silent rooms with laughter and new memories. "You've changed, Mama," Mikhail said one golden evening as they sat in her garden. "There's life in you again." Elena watched Zoloto playing with her grandchildren, his patience infinite as they climbed over him, buried their small hands in his gleaming coat. "Yes," she agreed simply, "there is." In the years that followed, as history swept through Russia with revolution and change, Elena would sometimes marvel at how one rain-soaked night had altered the course of her life. How a lonely widow and a lost dog had found each other precisely when they needed it most. How love, in its purest form, could bridge worlds as different as a humble cottage and a royal palace. And in quiet moments, when Zoloto rested his aging head on her lap, his amber eyes still bright with the same intelligence and devotion, Elena would whisper the truth they both knew. Sometimes, the souls who save us come in unexpected forms, and sometimes the greatest acts of kindness are simply being present when another heart needs ours the most.